Big difference between beer and wine. First of all, the ingredients are of course different, and the taste is of course different. The color is of course different. But I think the fundamental difference between beer and wine is beer is much more industrialized, and wine is, you have much more smaller wine growers. What is also very important in wine, that is the conditions of the soil, let's say the intensity of the sun. And that makes that there are much more variables for wine, and the region is much more independent. It's much more depending on the region. So that's why the tastes of different wines is so much more different in the various regions than for beer. So beer is much more industrialized. And but whether people are more knowledgeable about wine, I don't know. I think there are a lot of people also know a lot about beer.
Magyarországon mindenki fogyaszt sört, aki elmúlt 18 éves. Igazából tényleg meglepő, hogy mennyire széles a sör fogyasztása, de persze vannak, akik inkább fogyasztanak. Magyarországnak is különböző régiói vannak, ahol kicsit erőteljesebb a sörfogyasztás történelmi okokból kifolyólag. A Sopronit elsősorban Nyugat-Magyarországon kedvelik az emberek, illetve Budapesten is népszerű, és Kelet-Magyarországon is ennyire inkább szeretik az emberek. Ez az egyik legrégibb magyarországi sörgyár, több mint 100 éves tapasztalatra tekint vissza, tehát azt gondolom, hogy ez egy elég szép bizonyítvány arról, hogy milyen régóta gyűlik a tapasztalat a sörgyártás terén. Pont idén 110 éve Sopronban alakították 1895-ben. Eleinte csak nagyon kevés típusú és fajtájú sört gyártott. Aztán 1917 tájékán jelent meg az első ászok típusú sör, amit akkoriban, ha jól emlékszem, ászoksör Sopronból így neveztek. Azután ez így gyakorlatilag azóta megvan különböző neveken, de ez gyakorlatilag ugyanaz a sör, amit gyakorlatilag már majdnem 100 éve közkedvelt az országban. Ez egy nagyon jó sör, az én kedvenc söröm. Az elmúlt 10 évben azt hiszem gyakorlatilag minden évben elindítottuk a nemzetközi Mond Selection nevű versenyben, ami Brüsszelben van, és itt a Európából bárhonnan lehet söröket nevezni, és minden évben elindítottuk a Sopronit, és kivétel nélkül minden évben arany vagy ezüst érmet nyert, ami azt gondolom, hogy a legjobb bizonyíték annak, hogy ez nem csak Magyarországon egy jó minőségű sör, hanem európailag is egy elismert jó minőségű világos sör.
I think the light influence for beer came actually already when I was born, because as you said earlier, my name is Odin, and there are many legends about Odin, which is a god. And one of the gods, or one of the legends about the god Odin, is that he, as an eagle, came to Earth to spread the secrecy of brewing, and that's how, basically, when I was born, was my life mission to make one of the best beers in the world. And so I pursue that really every day in my daily life to really get the best beer to the consumer. Egész egész.
We're talking about the time of the Egyptians, and which is, say, 10,000 years ago. And well, it was really much older, of course, than even the picture, which is quite an old picture behind me. That there was basically an open pot with, say, a mixture of cereals in there. And people discovered by accident that the cereals started to ferment. Because you have to know there's always wild yeasts, as we call it, in the air, which starts to ferment. And basically 10 years ago, the same happened with the Egyptians, that by accident they were making the first beer. Well, the basic ingredients, I think, what is very important is water. Water is really the basis where it starts from. And then, of course, the other two that really determines is, say, what you call the grains, so the malt of the beer, and sometimes the other what we call adjuncts that you have as well, like maize, for example, or rice that are used. And then, of course, you have the hops. Beer is a natural product, 100% natural product. And all the minerals and all the ingredients are still in this beer. It starts basically with barley. Barley as the grain where it starts with as a raw material. We start to brew literally beer. So we start to mill basically the malt. We start to mill also the maize, and we start to mixture that with water. And then we go to a certain temperature trajectory for a number of minutes. In total, the total process of that phase, which is called mashing, takes roughly 2 hours. And during that process, during that mashing process, basically the soluble proteins and starch that is in the grains, so in the malted barley, in the malt, starts to be converted to sugar, basically. We transfer it from the so-called mash tun to the lauterton. And the lauterton has a filtration function, so it filters the liquid from the solids. And the liquid, the wort, it's called, is being transported to the wort copper, where the wort is boiled for a number of reasons. One of the big reasons is the step of the process where we add the hops. Once we have finished the wort boiling, we go to a so-called whirlpool, and in the whirlpool, the proteins that are solid are separated from the very clear wort. So there we make 100% clear wort. And the wort is then transferred to the cellars, where the wort is being cooled, because now it's still around 95, 96 degrees coming out of the boiling process. So it is cooled down to roughly 8 degrees. And then there are two important steps in that process stage. Is there we start to aerate the wort, so we're adding oxygen to the wort, and we start to add also the yeast there, because that is basically the start of the fermentation. In the fermentation, we basically are converting the sugars that has been produced during the brewing process. Say the main fermentation takes what we call 5 to 6 days. And then what we start to cool down this what we call young beer. And this young beer has to then start to mature. So we cool it down, and then we get the maturation process, which is the lagering process. And that is really to get rid of a number of off flavors and to get also a more settlement of the yeast, because during the fermentation the yeast starts to go down. Once we have finalized the lagering process, then the beer is basically ready to be filtered. So we have then an unfiltered beer, which looks a bit like a white beer. It looks hazy, you cannot look through. We start the filtration of the beer to make it a bright beer, to really make it look through fully bright. There we make a number of adjustments, where we start to fill the beer that has been a long time on the road into the bottles. And then where of course we have the bottles are filled, they're labeled, then packed into crates, and then they're basically ready to be in storage and shipped to our customers. We will not compromise in anything on quality. And what you will find that throughout the process, if it comes from intake to the mold, all the way to the finished products, in every different step that we do, an enormous amount of measurements are being done to make sure that continuously the process is exactly going as we have set it.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.